We are approaching a huge milestone in just a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. What is that milestone?
The milestone is 5 years of TFL Talking Trucks podcast. Because
That's true.
I don't know if you remember this case, but on March 19th, 2020, we launched this podcast.
Yeah, I do remember that actually. That was pretty early along in my time here.
That was like at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, we had nothing better to do but start a podcast, so here we are.
Here we are, and we're as successful as ever, right?
Yeah, and how many episodes later?
This is like 273. I'm looking at the producer, Cole, and producer says almost there.
Right on. So we'll have to do something extra special for that episode, but for this episode, what do we got?
Well, we are talking about news. A lot of truck news are recently dropped. And also, we're not just reporting news that comes from somewhere else. We're also newsmakers here at TFL Truck. So we made some news of our own.
Yeah, which is an exciting and vague lead into something that we'll explain.
Yes, and I call it rapid fire news. We've had that segment before, so we can talk about several news items. And also stuff that excites us and also stuff that bums us out. And we've created names for all of this.
Yeah, you came up with some pretty good names.
So stuff that excites us is spools our turbos.
I like that.
And stuff that bums us out exhausts us.
Right.
I was also gonna call it like puts an exhaust brake on us.
Yeah, it's a little too long.
But I think it's a little too long.
It's clunky,
It's exhausting.
Yeah, and I like exhaust us. It's nice and clean. It's simple.
And also, we want to talk about some overhyped pickup trucks and also some underappreciated pickup trucks as well.
Absolutely. So starting off with some of the rapid fire news, should we begin with the things that spool our turbos?
I think so. Let's be positive. Very, very positive right now.
Yeah, so to start off on a good note so that we can get really negative later.
Exactly. So you and I recently did this news story that started as kind of a rumor and then was verified by a couple of different outlets.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with turbochargers, actually. But it's kind of the comeback of the V8 engine into the industry of pickup trucks.
Absolutely, and it seems like that's happening at least with a couple brands because we know from GM that they say they're planning another next generation of their V8s for their pickup trucks. Yeah. But we also seem to have pretty good indication that Ram is working on bringing the Hemi back as well.
Yeah, and we can actually go to another view of 2026 Ram 1500 trucks that our producer Cole has pulled up. And I actually used a little bit of AI to come up with a couple of different images. But basically, this news says that the 5.7 liter Hemi may be making a comeback, as well as a 6.4 liter Hemi, the big V8 from the heavy duty trucks, may also make an appearance in the Ram 1500 light duty truck lineup as well.
Yeah, which would be really cool to see because the 1500 has never had the 6.4 naturally aspirated. And we have to wonder why, because that 6.4 was in the Grand Cherokee, it was in the Durango, it was in several vehicles.
Yeah.
Seeing that 6.4 Hemi in the Ram 1500 just seems to make sense because that would be a good bit of power output in a big V8 for a Ram 1500. Plus, it's a motor that they already have, and it's a motor that they're still producing, like you said, in the 2500.
Exactly. You and I just recently saw the 2025 Ram heavy duty lineup. We cannot really talk about some of our driving impressions from that until next week. But 6.4 liter Hemis were there at the event in several different trucks. Yeah. And the heavy duty engine is still there. I also wanted to mention a couple of, so we published this video on our TFL Truck channel talking about this Ram 1500 news. By the way, we asked Ram officially. Mm-hmm. They said no comment.
Which is standard. Whenever you ask those kind of questions, they just say, we don't discuss future product.
Yeah, every manufacturer says that until they get closer to what they want to actually announce. Yeah. And then you can kind of see that news officially. But a lot of the comments on this video, first of all, said, we just don't want the old 5.7 Hemi to just come back straight away. I mean, the way it was.
As it was. And we agree. We said in that initial news video that we did that if that 5.7 Hemi is coming back, it needs to be a new generation of the engine because the old one was very long in the tooth. It had been around for a long time. So they would need to make updates to that motor for power output, for efficiency, just to
reliability too.
Bring it into a competitive area.
And they have a good opportunity maybe to do that because some of the problems with that engine are known. I mean, it's been around for 15 or 17 years.
Absolutely.
So if you have some of those known issues, maybe some warranty claims that were on that engine before, it's a great opportunity for Ram to look into that, try to, address a lot of those issues and have a really good engine, really reliable engine in their truck.
Yeah, and keeping the V8s around because the Hurricane engines that they have at the moment, on paper, they're good. They make good power. They're very smooth when you drive them, but they don't have a ton of personality. And we don't want to see the Hurricane go away or anything, but it would be nice to have the alternative of also there being a Hemi V8 option.
Yeah, and also the F-150 5-liter Coyote is still around. And as far as we can tell, it doesn't have an end date.
Yeah.
Ford did not announce any sort of plans to discontinue the 5-liter from the F-150 lineup. So I think it would be wise for Ram probably to offer more choices in their truck.
Yeah, and again, GM, of course, has the 5.3 and the 6.2, and those don't seem to be going anywhere. So we think that there might be, hopefully soon, a bit of a resurgence of V8s in pickup trucks.
All right, let's talk about heavy-duty trucks for a second, and also a new route that you and I discovered. Well, I guess
it was already discovered, yeah.
It's been used for decades by engineers to verify and certify trucks for towing.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Davis Dam grade. This is really on the border of Nevada and Arizona.
Yep.
And this is Union Pass Mountain Road.
Yeah, it's right by the Colorado River. This is a really cool stretch of road because if you haven't heard of it before, this is what basically all of the truck manufacturers use as one of the tests for actually rating pickup trucks to what they can tow. So what they have to do on this stretch of highway, it's about 11 miles. You start at around 500 feet of elevation, end up at 3,500 feet. That's about 5-6% grade for portions of it, depending on where you are. And when they run it, it has to be over 100 degrees, and it gets over 100 degrees there pretty easily all through the summer. We were there in March, and it was 70 degrees, so it wasn't as hot as it gets. But they also have to run it with the AC on. It can't be on recirculate. And they have to hit certain speeds depending on what kind of vehicle they're testing and pull up this grade while the cooling system actually allows them to still maintain speed and
also
not go into limp mode
cool the cabin
or have any catastrophic failures. So it's a difficult test.
And it's part of the SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, J2807 standard. And we've talked about on this show and our TFL truck episodes about the standard many, many times because about 15 or 20 years ago, it was a little bit of a Wild West. Manufacturers were kind of free to interpret their ratings and kind of publish their ratings in the way they wanted to. But then a bunch of them got together, including the big three, Ford, GM, and Ram, Dodge at that point. And Toyota had a big part in this as well as Nissan. For their pickup trucks, and they all agreed to kind of measure their towing standard in the same way, hence this Davis Dam test. But you and I tried to compare it against the iGauntlet, so we have a little, images from the Eisenhower Tunnel grade in Colorado, because some of the Ram engineers, when we were talking to them, said, we test really in two places, Davis Dam
and the Eisenhower Tunnel.
And the Eisenhower Tunnel iGauntlet, yes.
Yeah, which is a good thing because the two towing tests, so we call the Ike Gauntlet the world's toughest towing test, but our Ike versus Davis Dam, there's really two different challenges. So Davis Dam is primarily a challenge for cooling, which is an important test and a great test to have, but the Ike Gauntlet has a couple differences. So the Ike Gauntlet, obviously much higher elevation, get up to over 11,000 feet.
And the Davis Dam grade tops out at 3,500 feet above sea level.
Yeah, so power accelerating uphill on the Ike Gauntlet can be more difficult. I would say is probably consistently more difficult than Davis Dam. Also on the downhill, because it's steeper, I think you get a better test of your grade shifting, engine braking, the performance of the truck slowing down whatever it is that you're towing.
Exactly, and the Gauntlet grade is a little bit more even, so it's at 7% grade for more consistent distance, consistently in this kind of the same decline. And Davis Dam is overall a longer stretch, about 11.5 miles versus the Ike's 8 miles run.
Yeah.
But the Davis Dam, it seems like it kind of flattens out at certain places and then declines and then flattens out again.
Yeah,
so it has like undulations in it.
I felt like on the downhill at Davis Dam, it was not too difficult. I think most trucks would have a pretty easy time slowing down a trailer that it's rated to tow.
It's mostly about the
Dam.
temperature there, right? Really kind of heat soaking the powertrains.
For sure.
And everything else that's involved with that test.
It's interesting comparing the two tests. I think they're both very useful tests. And Davis Dam is the one that is a critical component of the J2807 SAE tow rating that all the manufacturers have to adhere by. But it's still, I can understand why the engineers use our Ike Gauntlet as well, because you get a lot of good information from that.
Yeah, and I think it's because of TFL truck. No.
Yeah, let's say.
All right. Well, the reason why we use Eisenhower grade consistently, and other outlets and other people have called it the most dangerous interstate because in the winter it's pretty treacherous. It can be very treacherous. There's many Instagram accounts that publish like I-70 things that our producer Cole likes to monitor.
Yeah.
They publish, many different weird situations, accidents. So it's not just that we're using it because we're close to Ike Gauntlet. It's about 70 miles away.
Yeah, it's pretty convenient for us.
It's convenient for us, but it's also a very difficult place to test vehicles at.
It is. It's a legitimate test for any truck, and it's a difficult stretch of highway, really in any vehicle. I mean, we see vehicles overheated and pulled off to the side of the road there all the time, whether they're hooked up to a trailer or not.
All right. So we'll have more videos from this coming up soon. So we have a video coming out in just a couple days on TFL Truck about us pulling a very heavy trailer at Davis Dam.
Yeah, with the new Cummins. So you'll get to see and hear all of our impressions about how that actually drives, how the truck handled that towing test. But it was really cool to get to check out Davis Dam because it's iconic.
Yeah, and this is the new Cummins, like you said, with a new 8-speed.
Yeah, ZF.
I almost said V8 because V8 is on my mind.
There is a V8, like we said. There's the 6.4.
Yes, but the new 8-speed is also there.
The Cummins was what we were excited about, and the 8-speed,
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about V8s because I think we're all getting spooled up. Our turbos are really going.
We're still just getting these turbos spooled up, although the V8s we're talking about don't have turbos.
But it still excites us very much. So Roman and I recently published a video on TFL Truck where we compared the Tundra V8, my personal truck, the TRD Pro, against a brand new 2025 Tundra twin turbo V6 on the Denver 100 MPG loop. The Denver 100 is basically a toll road all the way around Denver, Colorado, and it's about 111 miles because I really wanted to push the distance as far as we can to get the best data we can.
Yeah, and it's all highway, which is a good test because a lot of people, if you're going long distance, you're probably going to be on the highway. Yeah. So road trip MPG is basically what we're figuring out. And what were the two numbers between your V8 Tundra and the new generation V6? Yeah,
well, so Cole, if you're watching us on TFL Talk channel, Cole is pulling up a couple of clips with some of our results. This really spooled my turbo because we got some good results on both trucks.
Right.
But the new truck, the twin turbo Tundra, the new one, the V6 one, the difference wasn't insanely big. Like you would think the old V8 Tundra was always kind of bashed for being inefficient and like very, very kind of thirsty, thirsty engine.
Sure. That's a reputation.
So the new truck got 22.6 mpg. On the highway, so after the entire loop of 111 miles. But V8, it surprised me as well.
Yeah?
It did pretty well, 18.9.
Okay, so about 19 versus 22.5, so 3.5.
So 3.5 to 4-ish mpg difference, which is okay. It's like a 20% improvement.
Yeah, and over the long run, that adds up.
Yeah. You could save a lot of money. Like if you saved 20 to 25% of fuel costs over a year, that's a lot of money. This could be several $100s or maybe even $1,000.
Yeah, over
for
the
some
life
people.
of a vehicle, it would be
Yeah, thousands of
many
dollars.
thousands.
So really, I mean, it's a very positive thing. But still, I don't want people to bash the V8 too much because,
It's not like you got 14 miles per gallon.
yeah, which some people say the Tundra gets.
And in the city, it might.
In the city, yes. In the city, driving stop and go, the old V8 could be, really, really bad at like 14 or 13 mpg.
Well, and aside from the motors, there's other differences in these powertrains as well that have a pretty major bearing on their fuel economy.
Yeah, the new one has a 10-speed. The old one had a 6-speed. The new truck, we just had a clip here. The new Tundra has an air dam that deploys at speed. So it just kind of becomes a little bit more aerodynamic as it keeps driving. So the new vehicles have a lot of little different tricks that they use to really improve it.
Well, and also the older 5.7, the iForce V8 that's in your Tundra was by the time it went out of production, not the most modern, most sophisticated V8 in the world. So you've got 4 mpg despite all 4 mpg roundabout difference at most, despite all those other factors where if you were to take a Tundra and give it all those extra gears in the transmission, modernize that V8, give it some more of those good aerodynamics, then you could get much closer to that number to a point where it might not be a huge difference. Because we also did a video a while back comparing a Hemi V8 Ram versus a Hurricane-powered Ram. And the Hurricane made more power, and it was a bit more efficient. But those two were even closer in their numbers. Yeah. So it's not necessarily that V8s are bad on fuel. If you give the V8 some of these modern improvements that we see in some of these downsized engines in newer trucks, then they could be really close on fuel economy numbers.
Exactly, and I think that gives some credence to the V8 coming back to the Ram 1500 as an option, right? Because if you do make it modern, if you do improve it, like right now there's a little clip playing of the aerodynamic dam deploying on the Tundra.
Yeah.
And actually Ram came up with this idea several years back. They have a different design, but they also have a little chin spoiler that deploys at speed on a lot of Ram trucks as well.
Didn't your Power Boost have some active aero too?
Yeah, so the F-150 trucks also have a deployable kind of extendable chin that makes aerodynamics a little bit better.
So basically what we're saying is there's no reason for V8s to go away.
I think that's what this episode is about.
Cool, we're all in agreement, and that means we can move on.
Next item that excites us as well is I recently filmed a video, and it's publishing just within a day of this episode of the podcast, is I found one of my friends here locally has what some people claim is the best, kind of the holy grail of diesel Chevy heavy-duty trucks, GM heavy-duty trucks, which is a 2006 Chevy Silverado 2500 with a Duramax.
Yeah.
And I compare it to our new Duramax. So it's V8 versus V8 once again.
Yeah. So that time, diesel V8s, obviously. But it looked like your buddy's truck was in really good condition.
Yeah.
Had a couple tasteful modifications, but it was mostly...
Yeah, so mostly his truck, and Cole, you could pull up maybe a 2006 Chevy Silverado heavy duty, just so people kind of can get an idea.
Visualize it a little bit.
Visualize it a little bit.
Unless you're listening.
Unless you're listening.
In which case you're just out of luck.
Just imagine a 20-year-old Chevy Silverado heavy duty, right? So here's the thing. Why do people call it kind of the holy grail of trucks? So 2006 was a year or so, or maybe 2 years before DEF.
Yep.
So it did not have diesel exhaust fluid systems, and because they weren't mandatory at that time. And that kind of simplifies the truck. A lot of people like that fact that it doesn't have some complication in the exhaust system.
And also one less tank to worry about filling up.
Exactly. And that's still cheaper because you can save money instead of filling up DEF like we do these days. Also, it had a new generation of the Allison 6-speed transmission in this particular truck, which is 2006. So it's very easy to remember. It's kind of the devil of the truck. It's a 6.6-liter V8, 2006 year, 6-speed automatic.
Right. Well, that's 4 6s, so you're in the clear.
So it's not quite the devil.
Yeah.
It's something else. So it's 4 sixes.
Yeah.
And I compare it to our brand new 2025 Duramax 6.6 liter V8 that's in our fleet for long-term testing.
Yeah.
And that video is going to publish very soon. But what I did find is that, here's a little teaser, I guess, is that the old truck, which had about 285,000 miles on it, which is quite a bit of miles, actually.
Yeah, it's well loved.
But for a diesel, it's not insane amount of miles.
No, not
but
bad.
For any vehicle, that's kind of a lot of miles, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Performed almost identically to the new truck as far as like some of the acceleration it had. It of course doesn't have as much room as a new truck. It's not quite as quiet as a new truck as far as kind of the cabin comfort.
Yeah.
But it accelerated very similarly. It had very similar efficiency. So it might be the holy grail of diesels for GM.
Yeah, you just can't knock an old truck, especially if you value simplicity, which I do. I've got an old truck as well, my old Cummins 12 valve. Shout out to
Exactly.
12 valve Cummins.
But
but at the same time, to your point, new trucks are getting quieter, more refined, better features,
more space, more capability.
Yeah, the power figures are going up. The payload is generally going up. The tow ratings are definitely going up. The trucks are also getting heavier, so maybe they don't accelerate necessarily any quicker, although I doubt it, because a lot of the new trucks are spry. You can
especially
roast
the new
tires.
Power Strokes are insanely quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and newer Duramaxes, I feel like if you're much under 20 mile an hour and you give much more than 3/4 throttle,
you could light them up.
Oh, you light them up pretty easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, trucks are getting more and more impressive, and that extra weight that they have too, if you're hauling a big trailer, is also a nice thing to have to help you handle some of that extra weight that might be hitched up behind you. So all good things for the most part, but you can never count out an old school truck. And 2006 is not necessarily super old school, but it's kind of the
19 years old. Yeah.
To your point, it's kind of the end of an era a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of pre-DEF system. Some of those emission systems. It's got a very advanced transmission and engine. It made 360 horsepower, which is not a small amount of horsepower,
that's not bad.
actually.
Yeah.
And it's great that you mentioned weight and the curb weights and payloads. The old truck weighed about 1,100 pounds less than the new one at the curb.
Yep.
Because the new one is actually larger, the longer bed and all that stuff. But the new truck had about 1,000 pounds more of payload. So the capability is increased in the new truck, even though it's more massive and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's pros and cons. So those are the things that spool our turbos. The Duramax is literally.
Oh, wait. There might be one more thing.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so Ford just recently released a bunch of heritage images, which are pretty cool.
And one of them was the F-150 Atlas concept that you and I remember really well.
Yeah.
Because it came out in 2013, which is just 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Seems like yesterday.
It doesn't seem that long ago, but I remember when this concept came out. It was a big deal because this truck was substantially more boxy, more beefy looking,
but also kind of futuristic almost for the time, right?
Yeah, and really to Ford's credit, it was pretty close to the design that they actually ended up building. And we look at this now and you think, unless you're looking for it at a glance, you might just think that is an F-150, but this was
a concept truck 2 years before it actually came out to production.
Yeah, and the image actually of the rear end of the truck, you can see a couple more elements that are a little different from the production model: the roof, the tailgate design,
the exhaust
a little
pipes.
bit the tail lights too.
But the reason why we're including it is because Ford just was making a big push this week with some news. This is in our news section. They actually released a lot of cars. Heritage cars and concept cars, and also some pickup trucks like the Ranger EV that they used to build.
A Ford Ranger EV.
This is 1998 model, but it was basically kind of an experiment. It wasn't like a highly advanced vehicle. I believe it just had lead-acid batteries.
Can only imagine how bad that is.
And I think the entire bed of this Ranger EV project was like taken with batteries.
So the entire thing is a vehicle for its own propulsion system.
Yes, so it cannot do a ton of work. But there's also, what's it, the Lightning Flash? I forget what it was called.
Yeah, it had a funky name, but kind of a cool performance Ford Ranger concept, step side, which is pretty cool as well when it's
But
done
also a street
right.
performance version of it.
Yeah, and that's something that was pretty popular in the 2000s, late 90s and the 2000s, and seems to be potentially coming back a little bit.
Exactly. The Ford Maverick Lobo edition is a new kind of street-oriented performance vehicle. You're going to be driving it very, very soon, right?
Yeah, in a couple weeks, Cole, who's running the podcast right now, he and I are going to fly out and we're going to actually be driving the Maverick Lobo, which is going to be pretty exciting because this is a truck that we've been very much looking forward to. We bought a Ford Maverick, a hybrid all-wheel drive, which we think is probably a truck that's going to be relevant to more buyers because it's a little bit more
it was a little bit more affordable.
Yeah.
Us. Yeah.
But the Lobo is definitely the cool one. I mean, look at that grille. Look at the wheels.
It's got monoblock wheels, dude.
I know. Yeah, the almost kind of an 80s rally, like turbofan looking wheel is really, really rad. This reminds me of some of the SEMA concept trucks that they had when the Maverick was pretty new back in the day.
Exactly. And I'm sure you'll be talking to the engineers that put this together at the event that's coming up within a couple of weeks. And what I learned about this truck already is that I love when engineers kind of look at stuff that's available to them. And they picked several components from like performance hatchbacks from Europe. You know, they looked at the steering components, brake components, and they put it all together into one vehicle. So that, like, it's like anything goes, right?
Yeah.
They really picked, some of the best performance components and they put them all in one.
Yeah, which is a really cool thing that they're coming out with. Something that I'm excited to drive. I'm sure Cole is excited to film.
Yes, he's very excited.
He's nodding enthusiastically.
Yeah.
No, that's gonna be a cool event. That's something I'm super excited to check out. But
all right. Are you ready to talk about what exhausts us?
We got to talk about the things that exhaust us, and you've got a couple right off the bat.
And actually, it's mostly exhausting for me. I don't know if you're going to be exhausted by this.
Yeah, maybe.
But it kind of shook out that the couple of items on this news item has to do with electric pickup trucks.
Yeah.
And the first one is Scout EV. So the Scout Motors, Tommy went out there just late last year for the world premiere of the Scout Terra pickup truck and also the Traveler SUV. Very cool names, very cool company, backed by VW.
Yeah, and also a really cool design. Visually, they're good looking. And Scout is going to have a bit of a partnership with Rivian. So there's some people out there, especially because the looks are almost a little similar to Rivian vehicles. There's some people out there that think that these are just redesigned Rivians, but that's not the case at all. The platform for these vehicles is not only very different from the Rivians, but it's really unique in the electric space because these vehicles are going to have solid rear axles, which is...
For the Scout, yeah.
Yeah, which is a big deal.
Yeah,
because
that's what traditional pickup trucks have had for centuries.
Exactly, and it's not something that we see in other electric trucks.
Right.
Also body on frame, right?
Exactly, yeah. And they're very good looking, like you said, and also quite large. Not quite the size of a crew cab half-ton truck, but almost getting to that dimension.
Yeah.
And I was very excited, and I think Roman actually reserved one for the company. I reserved one for myself.
Even our editor, Zach, reserved one for himself.
Yeah, but then there's something that kind of spoiled my excitement that just recently came out. They have the Harvester, which is gasoline-powered range extender.
Yeah, and it's one of the big drivers for a lot of people that are interested in these.
Yeah.
So
that's not the spoiler.
Yeah, so a lot of people are interested in this range extended model because you kind of have the best of both worlds. You've got the instant torque and the regeneration and the charging at home that you get on the electric side of things. But when you need to make a road trip or even potentially tow long distances, there will be a gas motor backup to supply power.
Yeah.
But there's a big disadvantage to getting the model with the gas backup that most people, the majority of people who have reserved these, are planning to get.
Yeah, and they just recently basically said that this Harvester models with the range extender are going to have half the towing capacity of the other electric versions of the Scout.
Yeah.
Which The regular version would be able to tow up to about 10,000 pounds, which is a good number. Like most half tons can tow that, but midsizers can't.
Yeah.
Most midsizers tap out at about 7,700 pounds of towing. But these Harvester models will be rated at 5,000 pounds of towing.
Yeah, which is a pretty big penalty, obviously, cutting that number in half. And I wonder if that penalty has less to do with payload and more to do with the gasoline engine's ability to supply power,
and also
when towing that amount of weight.
So I looked into this because I was kind of pretty bothered by this. It exhausted me yesterday.
Right.
So they're thinking about using different chemistry for the batteries for the Harvester range extended models versus the fully electric models. And the LFP chemistry in the Harvester range extended models also can't like push as much current and as much power instantaneously as the other batteries. So that might be also the limiting factor for the towing. But it's kind of a bummer because here's the thing about pickup trucks. They have to do everything.
Yeah.
Because we don't tow every day, but we want to know the ability of if I wanted to tow every day, I could tow every day.
Yeah, and again, seeing half that number, if they could get it to be 7,500 pounds instead of 10,000, you could kind of excuse it. But from
halving it,
10,000 to 5 is a big penalty.
But these Scout vehicles won't be out for another couple of years. So maybe Scout Motors, if you're listening or if you're kind of watching the space here, maybe you could work on that a little.
Yeah,
massage it.
I would say these are far enough out that many things are subject to change.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to see them bump that number up a little bit. 7,500, I think, for a vehicle in this category would be plenty. It'd be nice if it still had the full 10,000, but I think you could get by with 7,500.
Exactly, and they'll make it more comparable to like a Ford Ranger or like a Chevy Colorado.
For sure.
In this space. So that'd be sweet. All right, the other item was Rivian is continuing to improve their R1T pickup trucks and R1S SUVs. The second generation of that platform came out last year. I was at the event. A lot of improvements under the skin. The motors were designed, the battery enclosures were designed, they removed a lot of wiring, they simplified the electrical infrastructure of the vehicle. They added new sensors, new cameras and radars, and they just announced the latest edition of the hands-free driving, autonomous driving feature. Yeah. But you still, of course, have to pay attention with your eyes and still be attentive to the vehicle while it's in this semi-autonomous mode. And they're kind of making a big deal out of this, but they're just catching up to the others. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of systems like that out there. Of course, GM's Super Cruise has been one of our favorites for a long time. That's a similar system where you don't have to touch the steering wheel. You can just keep your eyes trained on the road, even if you're wearing sunglasses, and the system works really well. It can even change lanes for you. You can even tow with that system active. So that's a really good system. Something that I think is a good enough system that it's actually genuinely useful rather than just being a gimmick. And the other thing is I think a hands-off eyes on the road system is the way to go. Because, and maybe this is just me, if I have to have my hands on the steering wheel for the system to stay active, at that point,
I might as well drive.
I might as well just be steering.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean, that this is not any groundbreaking, shocking new technology. But at the same time...
But what if it works better than Super Cruise? That would make me feel a lot better.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm not saying, discount this news completely. I'm just saying we should probably test this.
Yeah.
And see how it works.
And you would hope if you're going to come late to the party that you would at least come bearing gifts, right?
Well-dressed.
Yeah.
And with a few gifts.
You should come done up. So I hope that this system is every bit as good as Super Cruise. I think that's a tall order because Super Cruise is pretty good.
And like if Roman was here with us, he would probably say all these systems are junk. They're because you have to have trust in the system, right? If the system lets you down this moment or the next moment, you lose confidence in the system, and now you're actually more nervous while the system is on rather than just driving yourself.
Yeah.
So it completely eliminates the need for that system, right? If you're stressed by it, or so the system that exists, like Cole and I just used it for the Mint 400. We actually went out to Las Vegas and drove a Silverado EV with a Super Cruise system.
Yeah.
And I never felt like it had a glitch. It was doing what it was supposed to be doing. It steered well. It changed lanes well for me. So I had good confidence in that system. And I was more relaxed because of it.
Look, no matter where you sit on the effectiveness and the usefulness of these systems, realistically, if you live with a vehicle that has one, you will find most likely uses for them. I'm all about analog vehicles. Almost everything I own is from the last century.
Yes.
But even so, I've still found plenty of situations where those systems were useful. If I'm just on a boring stretch of highway drive, and if it's a system that works well enough that it doesn't concern me, then it's a nice thing to be able to take advantage of. So it's something that I'm happy to see in the R1Ts, so long as, to your point, it's actually a good system.
Yeah, and I find also with a good system like the Super Cruise and then maybe the latest Blue Cruise systems as well from Ford, it kind of, maybe if you're on a long trip, you might arrive a little bit more, a little bit more fresh, not super tired as you would be otherwise. You're like saving like 10 or 15% of your brain power because you're not using it completely to concentrate and drive consistently. So, all right, enough about that. How about we switch gears a little bit to a little bit overhyped and underappreciated trucks? I really want to talk about Ford Maverick a little bit more.
Yeah, so
because our colleague Mary recently tested our Maverick, and I think, would you agree that the Maverick is overhyped?
I think it depends on who you ask, and you and I both agree on this, that for some people who say, the Maverick is not a truck, and I don't know what people say. For the people that just write it off because it's small,
right.
I think it's underappreciated. But there's definitely some people who are like, this is the only truck you should ever buy. It's the only truck that's practical and that makes sense. And that's probably a little extreme too. So I think there's two camps.
Yeah, and I think the Maverick is one of those rare vehicles, which is both. It's underappreciated and in some areas, and also overhyped in some other by some others. So it does both. But nonetheless, Mary, she commutes a long distance.
Yeah,
like I don't remember exactly, but I think her daily commute is almost 100 miles.
Yeah, I mean, she's coming from Fort Collins. That's pretty far away, right, Cole?
Yeah,
Cole says it's around 100 miles.
Cole verified it. So I feel bad for Mary to begin with, because that's a lot of driving. That's a lot of driving.
Yeah.
But it gives her a great opportunity, and she's tested several vehicles on a daily slog. She drove a Nissan Leaf. She had a Silverado EV for a little while for the week. So, and the whole point was, can she drive a Ford Maverick all-wheel drive hybrid an entire week almost without filling up? That was almost 500 miles. 5 days, 100 miles each. And the answer is yes. But what shocked me was she reported 46 mpg.
Yeah, which is a really good number, because we've seen some mixed results with the Maverick. If you're doing purely highway driving at high speeds, 75 miles per hour or so, the MPG that we've gotten wasn't spectacular. It was just a little under 30 when we did the Denver 100.
Yeah, it was like 29-ish to 30, yes.
Yeah, so nothing incredible, but for the mixed driving, city and highway, that she does to get from Fort Collins here to our office in Boulder, 46 miles per gallon.
Here it is.
Nice.
We have it on the screen, so we have some data. She drove, I think that week she drove 4 days, not 5. 385.9 miles for that particular week that she was commuting. Out of those miles, 186 of those were electric. So when you're coasting or when you're slowing down on the Maverick, it actually shuts down the engine completely.
Yeah, and it can maintain just the little bit it needs to push against the air and kind of maintain speed.
Exactly.
Without using the combustion engine.
And the fact that a lot of her commute is like some of those highways like 50 or 55 miles an hour. These are not interstates she's driving, like you said. And there's also some stoplights and four-way stop signs that she has to go through. So there's a lot of stop and go in that route. But 46.2 mpg. That's
Yeah.
incredible for this vehicle.
That's a good number. Also, considering that this is an all-wheel drive Maverick, this is the new Maverick where you can get both hybrid and all-wheel drive in the same truck. So it's got a little bit more to its powertrain and to its driveline than just the front-wheel drive trucks. And that considered, and the fact that it's still getting close to 50 miles per gallon, that's a good number.
And I mean, she didn't verify it completely at the fuel pump like we would do on the Denver 100.
Yeah, so it could be a little under.
It could be a little under that, but nonetheless, it's super impressive. And the truck still reports after driving 385 miles, 214 miles left to empty, and over a quarter tank left still. And these Mavericks have smaller tanks that are about 14 gallons.
Yeah.
So
that's good range, too.
That's almost 600 miles per tank if you're city driving this thing, which is incredible.
That's awesome. So definitely this is, for some people, an underrated truck because that alone makes it very useful. We also hooked it up to a trailer, did the Ike. It did pretty great on the Ike.
Actually, it was slowing us down actually better than we expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also limited use cases for the bed in the truck because the bed is pretty small.
Pretty small, and it only totes 4,000 pounds, for example.
And you really, this model, just a standard hybrid all-wheel drive, you really can't do much of any off-roading at all. So there's definitely things it can't do, but the things that it does well, it does really well.
Yeah, and it has a bed, and you should watch Mary's video. It's actually on TFL Car. You and I consider this a pickup truck. Of course, it has a bed.
Yeah.
But the whole point of, I think, of her experience with it, she's not a truck person at all. She's never owned a pickup truck. So she's been driving crossovers and SUVs. She owns a RAV4. She drives a lot of cars. So would she consider purchasing a Maverick? I mean, that was one of the big points of this video, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good little truck. It's a useful thing to have around.
So I think it can be definitely underappreciated. The bummer, of course, is that the one we configured and purchased was about $36,000, which is actually creeping up in pricing quite a bit.
Yeah, especially considering that the interior design on that truck is good. It's a cool looking interior, but the material quality is not incredible. So it's a mixed bag with this truck, but there are several things that it does really well. It's not the truck that I would pick to haul trailer across country.
No, probably not.
But it's still it's a useful thing.
But I think if you're a contractor, even let's say you're moving ladders or I don't know, paint supplies from here to there, and you're driving in the city all the time, this would be an incredible utility vehicle.
Yeah, and I've seen several Ford Maverick utility vehicles anecdotally just driving around locally, and it seems to be a good work truck.
Yeah. I want to talk about Toyota Tacoma.
Yeah, so
because we have a couple more trucks to discuss, but I wanted to speak about the Toyota Tacoma a little bit.
Yeah,
because I couldn't quite decide, and I'm focusing on the new one, basically the one that came out in 2024 with a turbocharged engine. If it's really overhyped, or is it underappreciated, or both, maybe?
I'm laughing a little bit because this is an area actually where Andre and I I don't know that we disagree, but we have maybe some slightly different perspectives on it because you have the Toyota Tacoma in the overhyped category, which I can understand. I mean, it's the best-selling midsize truck. It's a truck that a lot of people swear by. So it's definitely got a very loyal...
And a lot of hype around it.
Yeah, a very, very loyal audience and demographic. It's I would say easily fair to say.
I don't know if we should show this video necessarily, Cole.
when your front diff blew up?
When Roman was driving it, maybe you could find another video.
It's not the best example for the Tacoma, but I can understand why you have it in the overhyped category.
Yeah, I listed it in overhyped.
My perspective, real quick, is I think at the same time, if we're talking about the new Tacoma specifically, is in some ways underappreciated. I do think that these trucks are priced too high. Several of the models, like the TRD Pro especially, is
oh my god, $65,000,
way more expensive than it used to be. Yeah, over $60,000. That's almost $10,000 more than a Ranger Raptor, which I would say, at least as far as performance is concerned, front and rear lockers, power and torque output. It's nice long travel suspension, everything. I would say that the Ranger Raptor is a better performing truck. So yeah, they're priced very high. However, I do think that in some ways these trucks are underappreciated because there's a lot of people that are mourning the loss of the old powertrain of the old V6. And I got to be honest, so we live up here in the mountains, we live at altitude, and driving up by 70 with the old V6 4Runner or the old V6 Tacoma was not the most pleasant experience.
Well, especially, I agree with you on this point that the previous gen Tacoma V6 with a 6-speed auto, that was not a very good combination.
Yeah, because it would hunt for gears. It didn't make a lot of power. It didn't sound particularly incredible. It wasn't that great on fuel. I grant you, a very durable powertrain. But the new truck drives much better up here at altitude. It's got a nice push of low-end torque. It's got that 8-speed transmission, so it's got a lot more gear ratios to choose from. So it's not wrung out all the time.
And it's actually a good pairing.
Yeah.
That transmission pairs well.
They pair well.
Engine.
It's not hunting for gears like the old Tacoma was. So I think in some ways, it depends on if all you're buying a vehicle for is durability, reliability, then probably that old V6 is the better way to go. There's some less complexity there. This powertrain has been around for a while, and it hasn't proven in other models for even longer than it's been around in the Tacoma, and it hasn't proven to be a really terrible powertrain in other Toyota vehicles. But drivability is better, especially up here at altitude. So I think in some ways it's underappreciated, actually.
Okay, but I'll have to disagree on your last point here because you talked about kind of the character of the truck, right?
Yeah.
The V6 versus the new turbocharged one. We owned one, right? The blueberry truck that we're kind of showing in some of the clips. If you're watching us on YouTube here at TFL Talk, it also doesn't sound very good. I mean, the new engines, and I owned a Chevy Colorado.
Yeah,
similar thing, right? Both the Chevy Colorado and now the Tacoma have 4-cylinder turbocharged engines. I agree with you. They have the torque, they have the performance, but they're both sounding a little bit buzzy. There's not very pleasurable experience in my view.
I think if you're buying a truck for the sound it makes, you're probably not buying either one.
Right. I would be buying a new 6.4 liter Ram, I think.
Yeah, or a 6.2 V8 in a GM truck or something.
If you want sound, you're probably buying a V8.
Even the Ranger Raptor's twin turbo V6 sounds
actually kind of pleasing. Yeah.
Pretty decent. That's probably the best sounding midsize, I'd argue.
I think so, because people would kind of ding the F-150 Raptor V6 for sounding poorly.
Yeah.
And also, of course, the Ranger V6 for sounding not so great. But I think, first of all, they tuned the F-150 Raptor exhaust with those valves and those loops.
Yeah.
To be a little bit more aggressive. And they did something special. I don't know exactly what they did on the Ranger Raptor.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit higher pitched. It's raspy.
Yeah, I'd say
it sounds okay.
I'd say they did a good job making a V6 sound good, which is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. This is a matter of opinion. V6 is not my favorite sounding engine, but the Ranger Raptor is not bad.
And that's why I put the Ranger Raptor in the underappreciated.
Yeah, and that I
think
agree with.
It's also appreciated, so I'm kind of going against myself here. But the fact is, you don't see them on lots. They're very hard to find. So maybe Ford underappreciates their own truck.
Yeah, maybe they need to build more of them.
Ford, are you listening?
Because
it's a great truck. Why aren't you building more of these?
Because it's not to say that $55,000, $56,000 for a Ranger Raptor is inexpensive for a mid-sized truck. It's a high price, but compared to some of the other options out there on the market, you are getting a lot of content built into that truck with its hardware for the money. Again, front and rear lockers, Fox live valve suspension, 33-inch tires, and ours with an $800-ish Ford Performance Tune is putting out well over 500 pound-feet of torque from a twin-turbo V6 with a 10-speed transmission. The wide body truck, it's got a pretty decent interior, great ride quality.
It needs maybe a tiny bit more ground clearance. Maybe an inch or two more.
Yeah, those running boards on the sides
they're questionable.
They're durable, but they hang up a lot. So if you were to put rock sliders on this truck, I think that alone would make a pretty big difference. But
Heck yeah, and maybe raise the nose of it by an inch. giving it a tiny bit more approach and angle and clearance.
But this is an impressive truck.
Yeah.
It's a really good performer. Again, say what you will about longevity in the long term. We don't know. We haven't seen any indications that this truck is going to fail us after now owning it for coming up on a year, not quite a year.
Actually, I was looking into this because it's almost a year. April 3rd is going to be a year. We bought it on April 3rd of 2024. It's almost April. Close. So we're pretty close. I'm going to do a big video about this because it's a 1-year update. We can discuss in more detail everything what happened with it. And also we just serviced it, changed its oil. We
sent the oil analyzed.
Yeah, we sent the oil out for sample analysis, but I don't have the results yet.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait for that.
And a year is not a substantial amount of time, but still.
It's better than most things we test.
Yeah, a lot of vehicles from the manufacturers we only get for a week or two. So we've lived with this truck for a while, and there's not much bad any of us here at the office have to say about it in the time at least that we've owned it. So
yes. So yeah, let us know what you think about the Tacoma versus Ranger argument. Do you think Toyota can do better with the Tacoma? I think so. I mean, I think they can do better.
If the price was right, then it would be fine. It's just the fact that the TRD Pro is so significantly more expensive than the Ranger Raptor, for me, makes it a tough thing to justify.
Yeah, and also the hybrid systems in the Toyota pickups is not really meant for efficiency, which is kind of counterintuitive. I mean, Toyota hybrid has been known in most other vehicles they built, the Prius, the Sienna, the Camry. All the other hybrids that they build are very, very efficient.
Yeah, and the hybrid systems in the Toyotas, whether the 4Runner or the Tacoma, gets you a
1 or 2 mpg.
Yeah, maybe 2, 3 in the city.
Yeah, that's what it gets. So let us know what you're thinking about this. And I think I want to wrap up this episode by talking about the most popular video that we published within the last week.
Yeah.
Thanks to a huge team effort. This was Nathan, our buddy Nathan, out in California, going out under short notice and able to get a very cool story about the Tello MT1 truck.
This is a really interesting design, one that I've seen some pictures of, and I've been a bad journalist. I haven't actually done the research to learn about all the specs.
You can ask me.
So I'm going to learn, as maybe some of our audience learns in real time when I ask you about it. Interesting thing about this right off the bat is the design of it. When they've got it parked next to a Mini Cooper, I was going to say the design of it almost reminds me a little bit of the classic Mini, which was a really smart design as far as packaging, where they pushed the wheels out to all 4 corners as far as they would go, and managed to package the engine and the powertrain and fuel tank and everything such that such a tiny car was able to seat quite a few people and a lot of stuff. And this seems to be kind of a similar philosophy, but of course it's got a bed.
So it's a little tiny pickup. They're actually calling it the mini truck. And this also harkens to the K trucks, right, from other overseas markets like Japan and others, and actually I was recently in South Korea with the Hyundai event for the Ioniq 9. And for example, I went into the basement parking structure at the hotel.
Yeah.
And I ended up accidentally at the utility level, not like the parking garage level, but like level where the commercial vehicles are delivering food and like actually working. And there were dozens of little K trucks there.
Yeah, they're extremely useful vehicles. We actually have a Japanese K truck. We've got a Honda Acti up at the ranch. It's something that we're not allowed to register here in Colorado, which is unfortunate. But this would be something that you would be able to buy
and street legal
and street register. So what's the powertrain on this little mini truck?
So you mentioned the size of it is about 152 inches long, which is about what a Mini Cooper,
a modern
two-door,
Mini Cooper is,
modern Mini Cooper two-door length is. But it does have 4 doors. Nathan is pretty tall.
Yeah.
He's able to get into this truck in the front and the rear seats.
It's a bit of a squeeze.
It's a bit of a squeeze, but the inside is kind of bigger than the outside. That's a certain concept that we've seen from some other manufacturers, like you mentioned. Also, Honda is very good at this, right? If you look at like a Honda Fit from several years back, it's a small compact hatch, but when you get into it, you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
So you can get it as a 2-wheel drive, so only the rear electric motor. By the way, it's all electric.
Rear-wheel drive.
I don't know if you guys realized.
Little rally car.
little rally car with enough battery to go about 270 miles.
That's not bad.
Or you could extend the battery. They have two battery options. The maximum battery allows for 350 miles of range, according to Tello. By the way, this is a startup from a very passionate group of individuals.
Yeah.
And some of the individuals that are designing and building this also came from Tesla originally.
Yeah, and it's cool too that we've got some areas where you can move tie downs around in the bed. It looks like a really cool modular, useful design.
And also between the wheel wells and the bed, it's 4 feet.
Yeah,
So you could do that proverbial 4x8 sheet of plywood.
The 8 part of that dimension is probably going to stick out past the tailgate a little bit.
No, but wait.
It's got a mid-gate?
It's got a mid-gate.
Whoa.
Look at this.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
it's like a Chevy EV Silverado with a mid-gate or an Avalanche, right?
From back in the day,
The older Avalanches from back in the day.
Wow.
So you can extend it and
So
actually...
With the
Yes?
tailgate down, from the end of the tailgate into the mid-gate, did they say what the length is?
So I believe, look at this image. So with the tailgate up, and the front seats have to be also moved up. So I don't think I could do this.
You're going to be on the dash?
But maybe Cole. I mean, Cole is pretty slender.
You'd have to steer it with your chest.
Or
You wouldn't
you
be
are.
able to get your arms in there
So if you push the front seats forward
all the way.
and then lay down the mid-gate with the rear seats and close the tailgate, you could put an 8-foot object inside of the vehicle.
So if you leave the tailgate open, then you can actually put the sheet of
And
plywood in
tie it
there
down.
and still fit in the driver's seat to
Yes.
go somewhere.
Yes.
Which would probably be more useful. But that is still impressive, though, that they're 8 feet with the tailgate closed to the end of the mid-gate at best with the seats pushed forward. So with the tailgate down...
You could tie it down with straps
Yeah.
and have some space on the inside as well.
That's awesome. And again, the fact that it's so compact and yet a 4-door, so you can also squeeze 4 people in there. It's going to be tight, squeezing people into the back seat.
Exactly. And we're looking at a pre-production prototype, right? So some of the materials are still not really production ready. Some of the features of this truck are not fully ironed out and detailed. But for all-wheel drive models, so there's a motor in the front and a motor in the rear, offering full all-wheel drive basically capability. You still can get up to 350 miles of range. This was pretty surprising to Nathan, and it was also surprised me when I was watching this story from Nathan. But here's the thing. You can see the CEO. Nathan is interviewing the CEO of Tello Trucks. Basically, their whole thing is the motor is like a transmission almost.
Interesting.
So the motor actually delivers the energy in the battery to the road. But the secret sauce is actually in the battery, according to Tello Trucks. And I kind of see their explanation. So the secret sauce is in the packaging of the battery, the chemistry of the battery, just the energy it can deliver. But in the right mode, even with all-wheel drive, you can disconnect the motor, use only one. So you could actually manage the efficiency in a very interesting way to where you can get a lot of range but still have a lot of power.
Yeah, I love the idea of this. This is essentially, if you think of it like a domestic K truck, then it sounds like a really awesome idea, potentially useful and very compact thing that you could use to go pick things up, haul stuff around. You're not going to tow a big trailer with it, but it would still be a fun, useful runabout.
Well, we talked about the Maverick.
Yeah,
this is like
totally.
an electric Maverick that's a little smaller.
Exactly. It's like the
Basically.
next step into Maverick territory, making it even smaller.
Yeah.
What I will say is that we've seen over the years a lot of startups that haven't worked out. There were the canoe trucks.
There's the Bollinger trucks.
Just recently didn't work out.
Yeah, that really exhausts me, actually.
Yeah. So this is a startup that I very much hope everything works out, and I hope that they're able to hit all of these figures, all of these numbers that they're throwing out there, like 350 miles of range.
Up to 500 horsepower. Pricing.
500 horsepower in that?
Can you imagine?
I hope they don't do that, because that sounds dangerous. No, I hope they do, because that would be a hilarious good time. But again, I think it's incredibly difficult. I can only imagine to come up with a prototype like this, engineer it, build a prototype,
and then deliver it to production.
But that's easy compared to actually bringing it to production and hitting all of these things that you're saying it's going to be able to do. So until this reaches production, I'm going to sit here with my fingers and my toes crossed, and I won't uncross them until this truck reaches production, because I hope it happens. But things might change a little bit over time, the exact specs and pricing.
You're absolutely right. Right now, we're living in kind of unpredictable times also, and it's always been unpredictable.
Yeah.
So to actually start an automotive company and actually make it successful, Rivian is probably the best example of that, which is a new company coming into the space. They've recently reported a profitability for the company, which was very hard to do.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
So the way Tello is approaching this, so they engineered the biggest comments on this video. And by the way, we almost have 400,000 viewers that has seen this story already. It was one of our best stories, like I said, most popular stories of the week. A lot of people commented about safety. People are concerned, as they would, because the vehicle is so small, that what happens in a crash? What happens if it meets an F-250 on a highway, right? All those are pretty valid points.
Yeah, for sure.
But Tello is ready. They're engineering it with carbon fiber front sections. The BMW i3 that my wife drives? Same concerns. Very small vehicle, very lightweight. What happens when you put that vehicle on a modern interstate in the United States with lifted F-250s running around constantly? Well, the i3 has like a monocoque, very, very rigid carbon fiber structure. This is not dissimilar of this Tello truck, but they're using some components, aluminum and carbon fiber, to really kind of make the structure as safe as possible. But also, all of the weight of this vehicle is in the floor.
So it's going to be an autocross monster.
It could be an autocross absolute fireball, but also should be relatively safe for the size.
I don't think it's controversial or unfair to say that if and when this hits production, there's probably going to have to be some compromises made, right? Whether it's the price tag or whether it's some of the features or numbers, metrics, range, power, whatever that they're promising. But again, fingers crossed, I hope that this hits production as similar to what it is that they're promising as possible.
So here's one more thing. They're promising, first of all, they're going to outsource the production. So they're not building a factory. They're going to outsource production of this vehicle to another company.
Yeah, which is not unusual.
For example, G-Wagons are built by Magna Steyr in Austria, right? So Mercedes doesn't actually build G-Wagons by themselves. So this is not a new concept. But it can also go south, like Fisker.
Yeah.
So Fisker went belly up also. But they're promising a starting price of $41,500 for a two-wheel drive, smaller battery version of this. So that's like a fully loaded Maverick by price.
Yeah.
So a lot of commenters on this story said that's too expensive.
Yeah. Well, and again, that would be one of the compromises you would have to make. If you want this truck to be able to do all of those things, it's not going to be cheap.
And be electric.
They're using carbon fiber and everything.
And by the way, Nathan asked this question in the story because you would argue, you might say, why make it electric? Why don't you put a tiny, 3-cylinder gasoline engine in it or a tiny diesel?
Can I guess?
What?
Packaging.
It's packaging, but it also has to do with regulations.
Your feet live right above the wheels. Where would you put an engine? In the bed?
The Acti K-Truck?
Get rid of the bed.
In the Acti, the engine is in the rear axle.
Yeah, it is. It's
so
underneath.
you could push the engine in the back of this truck. But
that's true.
But here's the thing. If you look at the current regulations, if you look at the EPA, and this is the reason why the Tacoma footprint and wheelbase is longer than before, and the Chevy Colorado wheelbase is longer than before, and F-150s are so popular, is because they regulate efficiency for the fleet of the vehicles based on the footprint. So the smaller the footprint, the more efficient you have to be by regulations. So if you create a tiny vehicle like this Tello truck, it would have to get like 60 mpg.
Yeah.
And that becomes almost undoable
And
with
also,
a gasoline
for a
powertrain.
vehicle like this, an electric powertrain personally doesn't bother me at all. I'm not going to be a strict hard backer of I don't want electric. I want it to be a little 3-cylinder 1200 cc engine. All right.
Okay.
Is anyone out there, fighting for? It's not going to have a V8, so
No, I think for
whatever,
this one,
might as
it
well
makes
be
total
electric,
sense.
right?
And it does increase the price. But if you're using it as a daily driver utility vehicle, it may make a lot of sense for you. But like you and I just talked about Cummins on the Davis Dam,
Yeah.
heavy duty trucks are probably, I don't see them being electric anywhere in the next 10 years.
No, that'd be hard to do.
Because the
in
diesel
that
engine
kind of
is
vehicle.
really great at going long distance and easy to refuel.
Yeah.
And has a lot of torque.
Yeah,
right?
that's a situation where a big combustion engine makes sense. This is an application where an electric motor, I think it makes perfect sense. And I don't know, maybe I'm just desensitized to price after we've been doing this job for so long and we've seen some of these crazy price tags.
Yeah.
But in a world where you can get a side-by-side, a brand new
for
side-by-side
$40,000.
for over $60,000 for some of them, and it's not even street legal. This for 40, it's not cheap, but that doesn't sound outside of the realm of what's reasonable to me.
So yeah, once again, let us know what you think about some of these stories. Also, tell me what you think about some of my naming for some of our segments.
Yeah, do you like when we spool our turbos?
Or when we're exhausted. Do you like some of the other? So next week we're gonna have a long interview.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a guest on our podcast, and
So you won't have to suffer through me.
or me as much. But I want to call that podcast Long Haul.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you think that's a negative connotation, like a long haul, like it's just boring?
Ah, you're long haul trucking, man.
Long haul trucking, which actually we were. We were in the
Yeah.
Cummins truck, long haul trucking with the chief engineer, Doug Killian.
Yeah, talking all about how that truck tows. So if you're interested in seeing how the Ram HD tows, that's going to be the one to watch next week.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us. Once again, remember, Carish is another podcast we have.
Yeah,
where
really fun.
you are one of the presenters as well.
I have been one time. Maybe they'll invite me back so they can make fun of me.
Yes. So maybe we'll see Case again on Carish. And of course, we have Car Chat, our other car podcast as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.